Mount Rainier keeps me up at night because it poses such a great threat to the surrounding communities. Tacoma and South Seattle are built on 100-foot thick ancient mudflows from eruptions of Mount Rainier from millions of years ago.
The summit is very cold, lots of snow, glaciers, ice, and when it eventually erupts, that is all gonna melt very quickly and head towards these towns below.
Whoa! Earthquake swarm at one of the most dangerous volcanoes in the US, the volcano that worries the scientists the most. We'll get into this. The Cascades Volcano Observatory and the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network at the University of Washington have detected an earthquake swarm at Mount Rainier in the state of Washington. And it's very close to the very, very densely populated area, Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia, with many other small towns and settlements around it. And starting at night in the morning, 1:29 a.m. on July 8th. And so far, there have been several hundred earthquakes. Small events, yes, but it's a clustered swarm. You see it here in orange on that map. The largest one has reached 1.7, and it's right underneath the volcano. So we're not talking about tectonic earthquakes here. Volcanoes never produce like super big earthquakes. So earthquakes are located at depth of 1.2 to 3.7 miles. That's 2 to 6 kilometers. And as we see the current swarm here in orange, we see in blue all the earthquakes that happened since 2020. There's GPS stations around Mount Rainier, around the volcano. They have thankfully not recorded any changes in ground deformation. Should there be any land rise plus the earthquakes, that could be a sign that magma is rising up. And they're telling us that earthquake swarms are relatively common at Mount Rainier, and typically they do occur once or twice per year. But here's the difference to the current earthquake swarm. Usually these swarms have way less earthquakes. They're way smaller, fewer events. So this current swarm stands out because it has way more earthquakes, and they still keep coming as we speak. The last large swarm at Mount Rainier occurred in 2009 when many hundreds of earthquakes with a maximum magnitude of 2.3 occurred over 3 days. What could cause these earthquake swarms? Well, usually scientists say swarms like this are attributed to a circulation of hydrothermal fluids that are interacting with pre-existing faults at shallow levels below the summit of the volcano. Thankfully, Mount Rainier is very well monitored by a dense network of seismic, infrasound, GPS, and webcam stations. So far, no other changes are apparent at the volcano at this time. They're telling us that they will continue to monitor this kind of unusual activity and that they will issue additional notices if they are warranted. So why is Mount Rainier the volcano that troubles the scientists the most in the US? The snow-capped peak of Mount Rainier is quite visible if you're in Washington and if you drive along I-5. It towers 2.7 miles, that's 4.3 kilometers in the landscape above sea level in the Washington state. Thankfully, it has not produced a significant volcanic eruption in the past 1,000 years. So if we look at Hawaii, for example, has bubbling lava fields all the time, basically Yellowstone supervolcano. But it's Mount Rainier that has US volcanologists worried. Jess Phoenix, he's a volcanologist and ambassador for the Union of Concerned Scientists. I didn't know that's such a union. The Union of Concerned Scientists, very, very interesting. He says, quote, Mount Rainier keeps me up at night because it poses such a great threat to surrounding communities. Tacoma and South Seattle are built on 100 feet thick, that's 30.5 meters, ancient mud flows from eruptions, lahars, this is what we call them, eruptions from Mount Rainier. They call him a sleeping giant right now, and the destructive potential lies not with lava flows, magmatic eruptions. Of course, in an event of an eruption, the lava flows would be unlikely to extend more than a few miles beyond the boundary of the Mount Rainier National Park. So it's not densely populated there. So what's the problem then? I was there a few years ago. A friend of mine was looking for a property, and it was up in the hills, basically at the border of Mount Rainier National Park. So from that property, the only thing you could see was forest and that towering volcano. And I told my friend, I said, my gut feeling doesn't tell me good things. This mountain doesn't look friendly to me. I would not buy something so close by where evacuating, my friend had horses too, might not be that fast. I don't feel good when I look at Mount Rainier, I admit it. If I look at other volcanoes in the area, I feel better. It might sound strange. I would not want to live close to that one or look at it all the time. So here's why. I guess my gut feeling's right. So if the lava flows are not the problem, well, ash flows from eruptions, ash plumes and stuff, yeah, but this is also not what has scientists so worried, because the majority of volcanic ash would likely dissipate downwind to the east away from the population centers. The densely populated area are along the coast. Many scientists instead fear the prospect of lahars. And they can occur, I wouldn't say at any time, all the time, but they can occur after eruptions, a long time after eruptions. So what is a lahar? That's a swiftly moving, slurry mass of water and volcanic rock that originated from ice or snow, and it's rapidly melted by an eruption. And then that water and all that, it picks up debris as it flows through valleys and drainage channels. So it brings the lava and the volcanic masses further than the volcano would be able with its normal lava flow. And these lahars can come quickly, surprisingly, and fast. This is a picture of Mount Rainier from the Puyallup Valley near Orting. And I have been in Orting and I have seen the volcano from there. And you see this is a very flat area, a valley where things could go wrong. So scientists say the problem with Mount Rainier is that makes it so dangerous is that Mount Rainier is so tall and it's covered with ice and snow. So if there's any kind of eruptive activity that could melt the cold stuff, a lot of water will start coming down. And there's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people who live in areas that potentially could be impacted by a large lahar, and it could happen very quickly. Try to evacuate densely populated areas very quickly. That's what the authorities in Naples with over 6 million people are scratching their heads about because of the supervolcano Campi Flegrei that's acting up right now. If you're interested in that, scary things happening there, check out the videos in the end screen or my playlist. So, densely populated area that could be affected by the volcano. By this lahar, a fast moving debris flow. And we've had that. We have examples for that. The deadliest lahar in recent history was in November 1985 when Colombia's Nevado del Ruiz volcano erupted. So just a couple of hours later, after the eruption started, a river of mud, rocks, lava, and icy water swept over the town of Armero, has ended over 23,000 people in a matter of minutes. And we've just seen it in Switzerland. Now you might ask, there is no volcano in Switzerland. The Kleiner Nesthorn mountain peak was crashing down on a glacier. The weight was getting too much. The glacier broke off as a whole. So it was summer, spring, melting water, glacier ice, and rocks were mingling, causing this devastating landslide, a massive landslide that has buried the village of Blatten within 45 seconds, guys. So when these volcanic lahars come to rest, that's the interesting part, and it's also the scary part. They're like cement. So this hardens almost like instantly. It's like a concrete substance. And if you're caught by that, that's the problem. You're in it, let's say. You're still there, breathing. You want to get out of it. Then it acts like quicksand. It doesn't let you out. So really, really mean and dangerous. The problem with Mount Rainier is it has about 8 times the amount of glaciers and snow as Nevado del Ruiz had when it erupted. That is scary. So it's 8 times as bad. So the scientists are saying there's the potential to have a much more catastrophic mudflow / lahar. And you see how this looks. Lahar in Colombia. Everything's buried in this and then like basically stuck in this concrete kind of lahar. And what I also want to show you is a picture here that really shows you it's a 25-foot thick outcrop of the Osceola mudflow that came from Mount Rainier. Look at these dense rocks and guess how far away from Mount Rainier this is. This is over 30 miles away from Mount Rainier. And I have experience with that. When I cleared land on my farm, we found rocks that don't belong there. They came there by an ancient mudflow, it seems, from a volcano. So it was surprising that they would be even further than 30 miles away. The U.S. Geological Survey, in their most recent assessment, the federal agency considered Kilauea the most hazardous U.S. volcano. No surprise given if we know how many people live near it and how frequently it erupts. Of course, Mount St. Helens, which cataclysmically erupted in May 1980s, blew its top off, surprised everyone, was ranked as second most hazardous, but then Mount Rainier comes in 3rd place. And yes, these lahars typically occur during volcanic eruptions, but they can also be caused by landslides and earthquakes. Here's the danger. We don't need the volcano to erupt. We're at the Pacific coast, at the west coast. This is where Mount Rainier is located, the Pacific Ring of Fire. So there are frequent earthquakes. Thankfully, not frequent megathrust earthquakes, the big one that is somewhat overdue in this region. And here comes the catch, guys, about Mount Rainier. The geologists have found evidence that at least 11 large lahars from Mount Rainier have reached into the surrounding area known as the Puget Lowlands in the past 6,000 years. And within the last 500 years, The most recent of these lahars that the scientists have evidence of were not connected with any kind of volcanic activity, but they're coming from Mount Rainier. So, for example, they have one evidence that a large landslide on the mountain's west flank may have caused a flow event. So yes, we see this now in Switzerland, in Europe. I have reported about that. These massive landslides that are coming down from these tall mountains and rush into the valley. Some of them without glaciers, but the ones that come with glaciers, that was unprecedented in Switzerland, the Blatten disaster. So Mount Rainier is way more dangerous because there's loose, weak rock that sits there. And it's a threat of a similar spontaneous landslide triggered lahar that troubles the scientists a lot. We could see a small earthquake, we could see heavy rainfall, a lot of ice and snow melting at once. I mean, now we have an earthquake swarm underneath Mount Rainier that is shaking the thing. Should that potential next lahar have the same size than the past one? And here is the scary part. It only takes 10 minutes to the nearest places where people are living, and in 60 minutes it reaches the nearest very large communities. These are really short time frames. If there's a panic, first you need to recognize that there's lahars. Then you have to warn the people. They have to get into their cars. They have to get out. There's panic. Roads are clogged. Very, very dangerous, guys. So in 2022, they have conducted a new study and they have modeled the two worst case scenarios. In the first simulation, a 260 million cubic meter. 260 million. In Blatten, I think we were talking about 9 million cubic meters max. 260 million cubic meters, 4 meters deep. That's 9.2 billion cubic foot, 13 feet deep. Lahar would originate on the west side of Mount Rainier. Unfortunately on the west side, because that goes down to the communities that are located west of the mountain. So the debris flow would be equivalent to 104,000 Olympic swimming pools. It could reach the densely populated areas, lowlands of Orting in Washington about 1 hour after this starts or after an eruption. And it would travel at the speed of 13 feet per second, 4 meters per second. The second area of pronounced hazard is the Nisqually River Valley, where a massive lahar, and here comes, guys, chain reaction, domino effect, could displace enough water from Alder Lake to cause the 100-meter tall, like 330-foot tall Alder Dam to spill over. That's according to the simulation. Hopefully it will not break, but spill over. Can you survive a lahar that's coming towards your village? We've seen many examples in the Caribbean where lahars have buried whole villages and towns. The towns are not being rebuilt. Absolute tragedies and devastation. So if this catches you by surprise, your chances are not really great. We remember Mount Rainier's cousin, Mount St. Helens, its farther south in the Cascade Range, has triggered a devastating lahar when it erupted 4 decades ago. Thankfully, it did not reach any densely populated areas because Mount St. Helens is further away. But 2 people were caught in the Mount St. Helens lahar during a camping trip. Venus Dergan and her boyfriend Ronald Reitan. There are 2 of the only few people that are known to have survived being swept up in that debris flow. What they're saying is, quote, "I tried to hang on as we were being swept downstream. The bark on the trees were just scraping. I could feel it on my legs, on my arms. And at one point I went under the logs and the mud and I just resigned myself that this was it. I wasn't going to get out of this and I knew that I was going to die." But Reitan managed to lift her out of that mud flow and they rode on a huge log together down the river. Amazing, but that's not the norm. So when the log then came to a stop, they jumped onto an embankment and they crawled up a hillside where they were later rescued. But it took them 2 years to recover fully from the injuries. That they were even still able to climb up the mountainside, the hillside, was a miracle. So in the wake of the Mount St. Helens eruption, the US Geological Survey has set up a lahar detection system at Mount Rainier in 1998. And it has since 2017 been updated and upgraded. Since 1998, the settlements, the densely populated areas have grown so much. Orting has exploded. They have now identified about 20 sites on the volcano's slope, and the two paths that they have identified most at risk of a lahar now feature broadband seismometers that transmit real-time data and other sensors, including tripwires that they know if something's moving right away, infrared sensors, web cameras, and GPS receivers. So the system is geared towards both, guys, detecting a lahar should the volcano wake up in the future, but also the specific scenario of a lahar that's triggered just by a landslide, like it does in Switzerland, in the Dolomites, in Italy, in Austria and Germany, without volcanic activity. The original system that they put in the 90s only transmitted data every 2 minutes. That's too late in case of an emergency. That's why it's updated. The problem is also that there's a lack of historic reference data, because there are not many lahars around the world that monitoring stations have recorded. Maybe the Bluton incident, because they evacuated up front and they were filming this, maybe that helps the scientists here in the US. Just a thought. So they will have to learn. They need a wider range of instruments to determine whether a seismic signal, for example, that's received from one of the station is actually from a debris flow or from something else. I mean, now they're receiving an earthquake swarm that is coming from something else, but can that trigger a landslide? Is it not a normal earthquake? Is it not an eruption? What is it? Since that mountain and in that area, we have the big earthquake risk, we have the eruption risk, we have the landslide risk, and then the lahar risk, and things can trigger each other. The good thing is they're counting on infrasound instruments, for example, that would tell the researchers that there was a disturbance at the ground surface rather than deeper in the earth. And they're taking drills. In March this year, 45,000 students from Puyallup, Sumner Bonnie Lake, Orting, White River, and Carbonado, Washington have participated in a lahar evacuation drill. So it was the first time that multiple school districts have participated on the same day, and this was the world's largest lahar drill according to the USGS. So around 13,000 students walked up to 3.2 kilometers, 2 miles, to designated locations outside of the mapped lahar zone, while the remainder in schools situated outside the lahar zone practiced sheltering in place. So this is good so that the people know which direction do I have to walk. What the scientists are saying that the fail-safe parts of the lahar detection system are located about 45 minutes from the nearest large community. So that would then be the time frame that communities would have. That would have to work for them to get out of the danger areas. because most of what happens at this volcano is close by. And that's why they have to try to keep people away if things happen fast. And lahars can travel a long way from the volcano and have a big impact. That's the problem here. And the most recent lahar from Mount Rainier, roughly 500 years ago, this lahar had only 9 billion cubic feet, came down the volcano's west side, traveled down over 30 miles and did reach Orting, what is now the town of Orting, and was not triggered by any eruption, was triggered by a landslide, weak rock, and gravity. And you see the simulation here where this was going, over Orting, Puyallup, Sumner. So they have conducted flow models. They wanted to know where would they flow. This is also interesting where you see it's the Nisqually River near Mount Rainier. These models are no forecasts or prediction, but they're a simulation that help hazard planners to understand what might be at stake. And if you're living in the area and if you're planning to live in the area, check out this map. But I would still don't go to the edges of the danger zones. If you can, live a little bit further away. If you can't, if you already live there, be aware, have your go back, have your evacuation route. What happens if you can't go by car? What happens if you have to walk? That is my advice. And guys, I hope you liked it. There's more going on. Check out what's going on in Japan. Volcanoes are popping one after the other. A large earthquake swarm is still happening with over 1,600 earthquakes. Check it out, guys. So much is happening. If you liked the video, if you want to buy me a coffee, check out the links in the description. Buy me a coffee, leave me a message. I will answer with a 30-second video message. You can answer back. We can see each other. Thanks for the supers. Click the join button to become a supporting member for behind the scene videos. Guys, stay safe. Enjoy the summer. I see you very, very soon in this one here, probably in the end screen. Bye-bye.